I'm Audrey Wilson, 34 years old, and I never thought my own mother would disown me through a text message. My hands shook as I stared at those cold words on my phone screen. Don't call or come over, we're done. My coworkers noticed when I dropped my phone, asking if everything was okay. It wasn't. 20 years working in my family's boutique chain, enduring Mom's criticism, all ended with a text. My reply was impulsive. Got your last wish. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a betrayal beyond imagination. Before I dive into this painful story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had family drama that turned your life upside down. Trust me, this journey gets wild, and you won't want to miss what happens next. To understand why my mother's text devastated me so completely, you need to know the complicated history of the Wilson family. Our boutique chain, Wilson Elegance, wasn't just a business, it was our legacy. Started by my grandparents over 50 years ago, with a single store in downtown Boston. What began as a modest boutique grew into a respected regional chain of 15 high-end stores across New England under my mother Rebecca's ambitious leadership. Rebecca Wilson was the perfect businesswoman from the outside, impeccably dressed, articulate, and charming to customers and business partners. But behind closed doors, she was a perfectionist who demanded nothing less than total devotion to the family business. Every dinner conversation revolved around sales figures and expansion plans. Every holiday was interrupted by emergency work calls. Every childhood achievement of mine was measured against how it might benefit Wilson Elegance someday. My father, Thomas, was the balance to her intensity: warm, where she was cold, flexible, where she was rigid. He handled the creative side of the business, designing store layouts and selecting merchandise with a natural eye for what would sell. When customers came back to our stores again and again, it was largely because of the shopping experience my father created. He was also the buffer between Mom's harsh criticism and us kids, always finding ways to praise our efforts even when they didn't meet her impossible standards. When Dad died suddenly of a heart attack during my sophomore year of college, everything changed. I was 20 years old, halfway through a journalism degree I loved, with dreams of traveling the world as a reporter, but Mom made it clear that the family needed me at Wilson Elegance. Your father would have wanted you to help, she said, expertly wielding guilt like a weapon. So I put my dreams on hold temporarily, I thought, and joined the family business. My younger brother Jason had always been Mom's favorite. 3 years younger than me, he studied business at Mom's alma mater and shared her cutthroat approach to success. While I got criticism, Jason got praise. While I got skepticism, Jason got trust. Where I saw employees as people, Jason and Mom saw them as assets or liabilities on a spreadsheet. Then there was my older sister, Natalie. Growing up, Natalie had been the rebel of the family, questioning Mom's authority and decisions from an early age. She was brilliant, studying fashion design and bringing fresh ideas to the business, until, 7 years ago, she suddenly decided to pursue other opportunities. At least that's what Mom told everyone. Contact with her was swiftly cut off. When I tried reaching out, my emails bounced back. Her phone number changed. It was like she disappeared, and Mom discouraged any mention of her name. For years, I tried to make the best of my situation at Wilson Elegance. I built our marketing department from scratch, modernized our online presence, and even won industry awards for our campaigns. But no matter what I accomplished, it was never enough for Mom. Every success came with a but attached. Great campaign, but the colors were too bold. Good sales numbers, but we should have hit them sooner. The tension between us reached a breaking point 6 months ago when Mom introduced Vincent Mercer as our new business advisor. Tall, polished, and always impeccably dressed, Vincent appeared out of nowhere with grand ideas for massive expansion, opening 30 new stores in 2 years, launching an expensive designer line, and eventually selling to a luxury retail corporation. I immediately opposed the plan, arguing that rapid expansion would dilute our brand and saddle us with debt. Our loyal customers valued our personal touch and family ownership. Becoming another corporate chain would destroy what made us special. Vincent dismissed my concerns as lacking vision, and Mom sided with him completely. Suddenly, I found myself excluded from key meetings. Documents were kept from me. When I walked into rooms, conversations would stop. Several loyal employees, who'd been with us for decades, were let go without clear explanation, replaced by Vincent's associates. Something wasn't right, but whenever I raised concerns, Mom accused me of being paranoid and uncooperative. The day before receiving that fateful text, we'd had what seemed like a minor disagreement about the marketing budget for the new designer line. I'd pushed back on Vincent's excessive projections, suggesting we start with a more modest campaign. Mom had seemed irritated, but not unusually so. Nothing in that interaction prepared me for what came the next day. Now I wonder if that disagreement was just a convenient final excuse for a plan that had been in motion for months. After receiving Mom's text, I tried to maintain my composure at work, but it was impossible. I locked myself in the bathroom, sliding down against the door, as sobs racked my body. Nothing made sense. Yes, we had disagreements, but to disown your own daughter over business decisions? It was extreme even for my mother. When I finally composed myself enough to leave the bathroom, I immediately tried calling my brother Jason. No answer. I sent him texts asking what was happening, but received only silence. Hours later, a cold response arrived. Mom's decision is final. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. The betrayal cut deep. Jason and I weren't always close, but we were siblings. I had attended every one of his soccer games growing up. I'd helped him study for tests. I'd covered for him when he snuck out to parties in high school. And now, he couldn't even talk to me personally about what was happening? I left work early, feeling hollow and numb. That night was endless tossing and turning, replaying every recent interaction with Mom and Jason, looking for signs I'd missed. By morning, I'd convinced myself that once everyone had cooled down, we could talk this through reasonably. That delusion was shattered when I arrived at work the next day, and my keycard didn't work. Confused, I was directed to HR, where a woman I barely knew informed me that my services were no longer required at Wilson Elegance. She slid a severance package across the table, 3 months' salary, far less than standard for an executive with my tenure. When I asked to speak to my mother, she told me curtly that Miss Wilson has instructed that all communication go through legal channels from now on. 20 years of service ended in a 15-minute meeting. I wasn't even allowed to collect my personal belongings from my office. They would be shipped to me, I was told. Security escorted me out the front door like a criminal, while employees I'd worked with for years lowered their eyes, unwilling to make contact. The hits kept coming. When I arrived at the family home where I rented an apartment in the converted carriage house, my key didn't work there either. After 20 minutes of knocking, our longtime housekeeper Martha answered, tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Miss Audrey. I was told not to let you in," she whispered, looking over her shoulder nervously. "Your things are in the garage, Mrs. Wilson said you have until 5 o'clock to collect them before they're donated." In the garage, I found my life haphazardly packed into boxes, clothes thrown in without folding, books stacked without care. Several valuable items were missing, including my grandmother's jewelry that had been promised to me, and a collection of signed first editions from my father. Worst of all, the photo albums and journals I kept from my college years, the last tangible pieces of who I was before the business consumed my identity, were nowhere to be found. As I loaded boxes into my car, a text came through from an unknown number. It was Diane, my mother's longtime friend from the country club. "Audrey, I shouldn't be contacting you, but you need to know they're saying terrible things about you. There are rumors you embezzled company funds. People are being told not to associate with you. Be careful." Embezzlement? The accusation was so absurd it would have been laughable if it weren't so destructive. I had never taken so much as a paperclip without permission. My personal integrity was beyond reproach. I'd even refused proper expense accounts when traveling for business, paying for meals myself rather than charging the company. That evening, while sitting in a cheap hotel room, the only place I could find on short notice that accepted my credit card, I received an anonymous email with an attachment. It contained screenshots of messages between Jason and Vincent from the past 3 months, discussing the Audrey problem and how to ease her out with minimal disruption. In one message, Jason wrote, "Once she's gone, we can move forward with the real plans." The realization hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't an emotional reaction from my mother. This was a calculated move that had been planned for months. My own brother had been plotting against me, smiling to my face while orchestrating my removal. I barely slept that night, my mind racing between shock, grief, and flashes of anger. By morning, I discovered my main credit card had been canceled apparently. It was a company card, though I'd used it as my personal card for years with Mom's explicit permission. My backup card was maxed out on hotel charges. My bank account, while still accessible, had far less in it than I expected. Years of having my housing and many expenses covered by the family business had left me with minimal savings. I was 34 years old, suddenly jobless, nearly homeless, with a reputation being actively destroyed by the people who were supposed to love me most. For the first time in my life, I understood how completely alone I truly was. 3 days after my world imploded, I received a text from Rachel Donovan, Wilson Elegance's former head accountant, who had resigned 2 months earlier. "We should talk," was all it said, along with an address to a coffee shop across town. Rachel had worked for our company for 15 years, hired by my father. She was meticulous and principled, exactly the qualities that made my mother uncomfortable after Dad died. Still, her expertise was too valuable to discard, so Mom had tolerated her until recently. When I arrived at the coffee shop, Rachel was sitting in a back corner, nervously checking her phone. She looked different, the sharp business attire replaced by casual clothes, her previously perfect manicure now chipped and neglected. "I didn't resign," she said without preamble as I sat down. "I was fired after I started asking questions about financial irregularities. They made me sign an NDA with a substantial payout, but after what they're doing to you..." She slid a folder across the table. "I have copies of everything." The documents revealed a disturbing pattern. Over the past 6 months, Wilson Elegance had been systematically overvaluing its assets, inflating projected earnings, and hiding debt through a complex web of shell companies. The expansion plan was nothing but window dressing to make the company appear more valuable than it was. "This is classic pump and dump," Rachel explained. "They're artificially inflating the company's value to sell it for far more than it's worth. Once the sale goes through, the new owners will discover the truth. But by then, your mother and Vincent will have disappeared with millions." "Vincent," I said slowly. "Who is he really?" "He just appeared out of nowhere." Rachel's expression darkened. "I did some digging after I was let go. He's not just a business advisor. He and your mother have been involved romantically for at least 8 months, possibly longer. And he has a history of targeting family-owned businesses, especially ones where there's a widow in charge." The betrayal felt even deeper. My father had only been gone 14 years, and Mom had always claimed no one could replace him. Yet here she was, not only involved with another man, but one who was helping dismantle Dad's legacy. More shocking was the discovery that Luminary Luxury Group, the corporation interested in buying Wilson Elegance, had ties to Vincent from previous acquisitions. He wasn't just helping sell our company. He was working both sides of the deal. "But why push me out?" I asked. "Why not just go ahead with their plan?" "Because you were asking questions," Rachel said. "And because of this." She pointed to a clause in the company bylaws, established by my grandparents and reinforced by my father. Major structural changes to the company required approval from all adult family members actively working in the business. As long as I was there, I could have potentially blocked the sale. Armed with this knowledge, I decided to confront my mother directly. I knew she would be attending the annual charity gala at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts, an event our family had sponsored for decades. I bought a ticket using the last of my accessible funds and prepared to face her. I spotted her immediately upon arrival, laughing with Vincent and a group of socialites. She froze when she saw me approaching, her smile vanishing like a light switched off. "We need to talk," I said quietly, trying to avoid a scene. "There's nothing to discuss," she replied coldly. "You should leave." "Mom, I know about the fraudulent valuations. I know about the plan to sell to Luminary." A flicker of shock crossed her face before she regained her composure. With a subtle nod toward security, she said, "My daughter is unwell. Please escort her out." Two security guards appeared at my sides, gently but firmly taking my arms. As they led me toward the exit, I heard Jason's voice behind me. "I'm so sorry, everyone. My sister has been struggling with some personal issues. We're trying to get her help." The public humiliation was calculated for maximum effect. Anyone who was anyone in Boston society witnessed my ejection. Potential employers, family, friends, everyone. As I stood on the museum steps, fighting back tears, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. "You should check what they're saying about you online." A quick search revealed posts in industry forums and local business groups suggesting I had been fired for erratic behavior and concerning personal problems. There were vague allusions to substance abuse and financial misconduct. My professional reputation, built over 20 years, was being systematically destroyed. The next morning, I discovered my bank accounts had been nearly drained, with just enough left to avoid triggering fraud alerts. When I called the bank in a panic, they informed me that several large transfers had been made to accounts I supposedly owned, accounts I had never heard of. Someone had created dummy accounts in my name and was making it look like I was hiding money. Sitting on the bed of my increasingly unaffordable hotel room, I felt a wave of hopelessness wash over me. How do you fight people who control all the resources, all the connections, and are willing to destroy you completely? For the first time, I seriously considered giving up, maybe taking what little money I had left and disappearing, starting over somewhere no one knew the Wilson name. As I contemplated my rapidly dwindling options, an email arrived from an address I didn't recognize. "I know what they're doing to you. It happened to Natalie too. Meet me at Cambridge Public Library, 2 p.m. Reference section." My first instinct was to ignore it. This could be another trap set by Mom or Jason. But the mention of my sister Natalie gave me pause. No one talked about Natalie anymore. Whatever had happened between her and Mom 7 years ago had been completely buried. Curiosity won out over caution. I arrived at the library early, positioning myself where I could watch people approach. At exactly 2 o'clock, a woman with short dark hair and glasses walked purposefully to the reference section, looked around, and sat down with a book she didn't open. I approached cautiously. "Did you send me an email about my sister?" She looked up, studying my face. "You look like her. I'm Samantha Reed. I was Natalie's best friend before she was forced out." Over the next hour, Samantha revealed the truth about my sister's disappearance. Natalie hadn't left voluntarily to pursue other opportunities. She had discovered financial irregularities in the business similar to what was happening now, but on a smaller scale, and confronted our mother. Within days, she had been fired, evicted from her apartment, which was company-owned, and essentially erased from the family narrative. "Your mother has a pattern," Samantha explained. "Anyone who questions her authority gets removed. It happened to your father's old business partners, then to Natalie, now to you." "My father's partners?" I asked, confused. "Mom always said they retired." "That's not what Natalie found. According to documents she uncovered, they were forced out after your father's death when they opposed your mother's plans to change the company direction." "Do you know where Natalie is now?" I asked, hope rising for the first time in days. Samantha hesitated, then nodded. "She's in Seattle. She made me promise never to tell anyone from the family, but this is different. She needs to know what's happening." She wrote down an address and phone number on a slip of paper. "She works at a small design studio there. She's rebuilt her life, but she never got over what happened. With borrowed money from a college friend who still believed in me, I bought a bus ticket to Seattle. The journey took nearly 3 days of uncomfortable seats, gas station food, and tense calls to the few contacts who hadn't abandoned me. I rehearsed what I would say to Natalie, the sister I hadn't seen in 7 years. Would she even want to see me? Had she blamed me for not standing up for her? The address led me to a converted warehouse in Seattle's industrial district, now home to a collective of independent designers. I found her name on the directory, Audrey Wilson, NW Designs, Suite 412. When I knocked on the door, the woman who answered was both familiar and a stranger. Natalie's once long blonde hair was now cut short with teal blue tips. Her corporate wardrobe had been replaced by casual artist clothes splattered with paint. But her eyes, Dad's eyes, were the same. Those eyes widened in shock when she recognized me. "Audrey? What are you doing here?" "Mom disowned me too," I said, my voice breaking. "And I think I finally understand what happened to you." We spent hours talking in her small studio apartment above the workshop. Through tears and occasional bitter laughter, we pieced together the parallel stories of our expulsions from the Wilson family. The patterns were identical: the sudden isolation, the professional sabotage, the financial warfare. Mom had executed the same playbook twice, with 7 years in between. "She told everyone I had a nervous breakdown," Natalie said, pouring us both another glass of wine. "Then she told me you all wanted nothing to do with me. I sent you dozens of emails that first year." "I never got them," I whispered, horrified. "She told us you wanted a clean break, that you hated the family business and needed space. I tried reaching out, but your email bounced back and your phone was disconnected. Because she made me surrender my company phone and email before she would release my last paycheck. And the phone number you had was my company line." Natalie shook her head. "She made sure we couldn't communicate. The revelation that Mom had deliberately kept us apart with lies was perhaps the cruelest betrayal yet. I had missed 7 years with my sister, 7 years we could never get back." As we talked through the night, Natalie revealed she hadn't been entirely inactive during her exile. After I got back on my feet, I started investigating. I wanted to understand why she would do this to her own daughter. She pulled out a locked metal box from under her bed and removed a flash drive. "I've been collecting evidence of Mom's unethical business practices for years. I just never had a way to use it." For the first time since receiving that devastating text, I felt a spark of hope. I wasn't alone anymore. And with Natalie's evidence combined with what Rachel had given me, we might actually have a chance to fight back. As dawn broke over Seattle, we made a pact. We wouldn't let our mother destroy what remained of our family legacy, not the business itself, which was already compromised beyond repair, but the values and integrity our father and grandparents had built into its foundation. "It's not going to be easy," Natalie warned. "She has all the power, all the connections." "She has everything except the truth," I replied. And now, so do we. With renewed determination, Natalie and I began methodically investigating our mother's business dealings. We created a makeshift investigation board in Natalie's apartment, connecting documents, dates, and people with red string like detectives in a crime drama. What emerged was far more disturbing than either of us had imagined. Our first step was tracking down former employees who had been pushed out of the company over the years. Each had a similar story. After questioning decisions or expressing concerns, they found themselves marginalized, then terminated on thin pretexts. Many had signed NDAs in exchange for severance, but several were willing to talk off the record. "Your mother started changing after your father died," explained Martin Chen, who had been our head of operations for 15 years before his sudden retirement a decade ago. "Thomas had principles lines he wouldn't cross. Rebecca seemed to view those principles as obstacles once he was gone." Through careful research, we uncovered the connection between Vincent Mercer and Luminary Luxury Group, the corporation interested in buying Wilson Elegance. Vincent had worked as a consultant for 3 previous family businesses that were later acquired by Luminary subsidiaries. In each case, the businesses were sold at premium prices, only to be gutted and liquidated within 2 years after significant accounting irregularities came to light. It's a sophisticated con, Natalie explained as we reviewed the pattern. Vincent identifies vulnerable family businesses, usually with aging or emotionally vulnerable owners, gains their trust, helps them inflate the company's value through questionable means, then facilitates a sale to his real employers. By the time the new owners discover the books were cooked, he and his accomplice have vanished with their cut. The most troubling discovery came when we began examining the timeline of Vincent's involvement with our mother. According to Samantha's contacts still working at Wilson Elegance, Vincent had first approached Mom at a retail industry conference in Chicago 18 months ago. Not 6 months ago, as I had believed. This revelation led us to dig deeper into company records from that period. Natalie still had access to some archived emails through an old cloud backup, including correspondence between Mom and the family lawyer regarding updates to the company insurance policies. One message referenced the updated accident investigation for my father's death. "What accident investigation?" I asked, confused. "Dad had a heart attack." Natalie's expression grew grim. "That's what we were told. But I always had questions. Dad was only 52 and had just passed his physical with flying colors the month before. The doctor said his heart was strong." A cold feeling settled in my stomach. "You don't think?" "I don't know what to think anymore," Natalie said quietly. "But I think we need to find out exactly how Dad died." Through a series of careful inquiries, we located Dad's old medical records and the original coroner's report. The official cause of death was indeed cardiac arrest, but the report noted unusual stress indicators and the presence of a substance that could have exacerbated an existing cardiac condition. The investigation had been closed when this substance was determined to be a component in a new blood pressure medication Dad had recently been prescribed. What struck us both, however, was that Dad had never mentioned having high blood pressure. He had been fanatical about his health after his own father died young. He exercised daily, ate carefully, and had regular checkups. "He wouldn't have kept a diagnosis like that from us," I insisted. "He was transparent about everything." More disturbing was what we found when we located his former physician, now retired in Florida. "Thomas Wilson on blood pressure medication?" Dr. Kaplan said, confused when we called him. "That can't be right. His blood pressure was textbook perfect. I never prescribed him anything for that." The implications were too horrible to voice aloud, but the suspicion took root. What if Dad's death wasn't natural? What if he had discovered something about Mom's plans for the company and become an obstacle to be removed? While we couldn't prove anything sinister about Dad's death without resources for a proper investigation, we did uncover something equally shocking. Through a contact at the law firm that had handled Dad's estate, we obtained a copy of his actual will, not the version that had been executed after his death. "This can't be right," I said, comparing the two documents. The will that was probated left everything to Mom with the understanding that Jason and I would inherit equal shares of the business when she either retired or passed away. "But the original will," Natalie pointed out, her finger tracing the relevant clause, left 40% of the company directly to us children, 20% to each of us, with the remaining 60% to Mom. The difference was crucial. Under the original will, Natalie and I would have been significant shareholders from the moment of Dad's death, with actual voting power in company decisions. Under the executed will, we were merely potential future inheritors, with no actual control. "She changed his will," Natalie whispered, the color draining from her face. "She must have." This discovery led us to Dad's trusted former lawyer, Harold Abernathy, who had retired shortly after Dad's death. We found him living in a small coastal town in Maine, where he initially seemed reluctant to speak with us, until we showed him the discrepancies between the two versions of the will. "I always had my suspicions," Harold admitted, inviting us into his modest home. "The will that was probated wasn't the one Thomas and I had prepared. But I couldn't prove anything. Rebecca had another lawyer from the firm handle the probate, claiming I was too emotionally involved as Thomas's friend." Harold confirmed what we had already suspected. Dad had deliberately structured his will to ensure all his children had a voice in the company's future. Your father valued family consensus, he explained. He believed the business would thrive only if all the Wilsons had a stake in its success. So our expulsions weren't just about silencing opposition, I realized with growing horror. They were about eliminating legal obstacles to the sale. As long as Natalie and I were recognized as Dad's children working in the family business, we could potentially claim our rightful shares under his true will, which would make us both 20% shareholders, Natalie added, and together we could block any sale. Harold nodded grimly. I believe that's exactly why your mother needed you both gone and discredited. If either of you had legal standing to challenge the probated will, her entire house of cards would collapse. As we drove back to Seattle that evening, the full weight of our mother's betrayal finally hit home. She hadn't just pushed us out of the business, or the family, she had potentially robbed us of our rightful inheritance by altering our father's last wishes. If we were right about the will being changed, it wasn't just unethical, it was criminal. I always thought she was cold and demanding, Natalie said, staring out the car window at the darkening coastline. But this goes beyond that. This is calculated, ruthless. She's willing to destroy anyone who stands in her way, I agreed, even her own daughters. That night, lying awake in Natalie's apartment, I couldn't stop thinking about our father. Had he known what kind of person he had married? Had he structured his will specifically to protect us from what he feared she might do? And most troubling of all, had that very protection signed his death warrant? The morning after our devastating discoveries, Natalie and I knew we needed professional help. This wasn't just a family squabble anymore. We were dealing with potential fraud, will tampering, and corporate malfeasance. Through one of Natalie's clients, we secured a consultation with Patricia Okafor, an attorney specializing in business fraud and estate litigation. Patricia's office was modest compared to the gleaming downtown law firms our family typically employed, but her reputation was formidable. After listening to our story and examining our evidence for nearly 3 hours, she leaned back in her chair with a thoughtful expression. You have the beginnings of a strong case, she said carefully. The discrepancies in the will alone merit investigation. Combined with the financial irregularities and the pattern of expelling family members who raise concerns, there's enough here to request an emergency injunction to pause any sale of Wilson Elegance while these matters are investigated. Can we do that without revealing all our evidence? I asked. Once Mom knows what we have, she'll move quickly to cover her tracks. We can be strategic, Patricia assured us. The initial filing will focus narrowly on the potential will fraud and your possible shareholder status. That gives us legal standing to request a freeze on major company transactions while the court examines the inheritance question. While Patricia began preparing the legal documents, Natalie and I implemented the next phase of our plan, finding allies still within the company who could help us. This proved challenging. Most employees were either loyal to our mother or too afraid to risk their positions. However, we identified several key people who might be sympathetic. Our first target was Wilson Elegance's IT director, Marcus Jenkins, who had been hired by our father and had always maintained a professional distance from office politics. Through a secure channel provided by Patricia, we reached out to him with specific questions about company emails and financial records that would be crucial to our case. His response was cautious but helpful. I cannot actively provide company documents, but if subpoenas were to arrive for specific communication threads dated between October 15th and December 3rd of last year, they would be illuminating. We also contacted loyal customers who had valued the family business's tradition and personal touch people who might be disturbed to learn it was being prepared for corporate takeover. Many expressed shock that the Wilson family was considering selling at all, confirming our suspicion that the plans were being kept quiet. Our most important potential ally was William Reynolds, our father's old friend who still sat on the company's board of directors. William had been gradually sidelined over the years, but remained in his position largely as a courtesy to Dad's memory. We arranged to meet him at his home rather than risk being seen with him in public. I've been worried about the direction of the company for some time, William admitted when we laid out our concerns. But Rebecca has been very persuasive with the other board members. This Vincent fellow comes with impressive credentials and the promise of a windfall for everyone involved in the sale. Those credentials are fabricated, Natalie explained, showing him our research on Vincent's past. And the windfall will come at the expense of everything Dad built. William agreed to help us by providing information about upcoming board meetings and decisions, but cautioned that his position was precarious. Your mother watches me like a hawk. She knows your father and I were close. His caution proved warranted. The very next day, we received a panicked call from William's wife. Jason came to our house this morning, she said, her voice shaking. He threatened William, said if he heard we'd been talking to you girls, there would be serious consequences for us and our grandchildren. William's in the hospital now. His blood pressure spiked so high the doctor was worried about a stroke. This physical threat from Jason shocked us both. My brother had always been competitive and sometimes cold, but never violent. It seemed the stakes of our mother's scheme were pushing everyone to extremes. Despite this setback, Patricia moved forward with our legal strategy. 3 days later, she filed for an emergency injunction to halt any sale or major restructuring of Wilson Elegance, pending investigation into the will discrepancies. The response was swift and vicious. Within hours of the filing, both Natalie and I were served with restraining orders, prohibiting us from coming within 500 feet of any Wilson Elegance property or employee. The documents cited documented patterns of harassment and threatening behavior, complete fabrications supported by affidavits from Mom, Jason, and several executives loyal to them. Worse, our mother's attorneys from one of Boston's most prestigious law firms filed a motion to dismiss our case as frivolous litigation from disgruntled former employees with psychological issues. They submitted evidence of our supposed instability, including manipulated emails, statements from company-paid therapists neither of us had ever met, and even photos of Natalie at bars that suggested a non-existent drinking problem. This is standard scorched earth tactics, Patricia explained when we called her in a panic. They're trying to drown us in legal mud before the judge can examine the actual merits of our case. The most devastating blow came when we discovered Mom had accelerated the sale process in response to our legal action. According to William's wife, speaking cautiously by phone while William recovered, an emergency board meeting had approved moving forward with the Luminary acquisition immediately, with the final shareholder vote scheduled for just 2 weeks away. They're rushing it through before our case can be heard, Natalie realized. Once the company is sold, it will be nearly impossible to unwind, even if we eventually prove the fraud. That night, as we sat in Natalie's apartment surrounded by our evidence and legal documents, I felt the same crushing hopelessness I'd experienced in that hotel room after being fired. Our mother had enormous resources at her disposal, top lawyers, corporate connections, and millions of dollars. We had a folder of documents, a modestly priced attorney, and dwindling funds. Maybe we should just walk away, I said quietly. Start over somewhere, like you did. Is destroying her worth, destroying ourselves in the process. Natalie was quiet for a long moment. Then she pulled out an old photo from her desk drawer, the 4 of us, at the original Wilson Elegance store on its 30th anniversary. Dad standing proud, his arms around all of us. Mom actually smiling. Jason and Natalie and me, teenagers then, dressed in our finest, part of something that mattered. This isn't just about her anymore, Natalie said firmly. It's about Dad, about the truth, about not letting her erase everything he built and us along with it. She gripped my hand tightly. We're Wilsons too, and it's time we fought like it. As the date for the shareholder meeting approached, we realized our legal strategy alone wouldn't stop the sale in time. While Patricia continued fighting through the courts, we needed to act directly to expose what was happening before it was too late. Our intelligence from William's wife confirmed that Mom had accelerated the timetable dramatically. The final shareholder vote was now scheduled for 10 days away, with the official announcement of the sale planned immediately afterward. Luminary executives were already quietly touring the flagship stores, measuring for renovations before the deal was even finalized. We need to make this public, Natalie argued. Mom's whole scheme depends on keeping the fraud hidden until the sale goes through. If we can expose what's really happening, Luminary might back out rather than risk being associated with a scandal. The challenge was finding a forum where we could present our evidence in a way that couldn't be immediately shut down by Mom's attorneys. We considered press releases, social media campaigns, and even hiring a publicity firm, but each approach had fatal flaws. Too easy to dismiss as bitter ex-employees, too slow to gain traction, or too expensive for our dwindling resources. Then, unexpectedly, Jason reached out to me. "We need to talk," his text read. "Alone. No lawyers, no Natalie. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. The Common." Natalie was immediately suspicious. "It's a trap. He's probably recording to get something he can use against you in court. Or maybe he's having doubts," I countered. "He's still our brother. Maybe seeing how far Mom is willing to go has made him uncomfortable." After much debate, we agreed I would meet Jason, but would record the conversation myself and stay in public view the entire time. Natalie would watch from a distance, ready to intervene if necessary. The next morning, I found Jason sitting on a bench by the duck pond, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. His normally perfect suit was wrinkled, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "You look terrible," I said, sitting beside him but maintaining a careful distance. "Yeah, well, destroying a family business is apparently stressful work," he replied with unexpected bitterness. For the next hour, Jason revealed a side of the situation I hadn't considered. While he had initially supported Mom's plans, believing the sale would benefit everyone, he had gradually realized he was being manipulated as much as Natalie and I had been. "Vincent has her completely under his control," Jason explained. "She does whatever he suggests without questioning. When I started raising concerns about how quickly we were moving, she threatened to remove me too. So you turned on me to protect yourself," I said, unable to keep the hurt from my voice. He had the decency to look ashamed. "I told myself it was just business, that you'd land on your feet." "I didn't know about the will, Audrey. I swear. I didn't know Dad had left shares directly to you and Natalie. While this revelation was important, I wasn't ready to fully trust Jason yet. So why are you talking to me now? What's changed?" "Mom wants me to sign some documents transferring additional company assets to a new holding company before the sale. The paperwork looks suspicious. When I asked questions, Vincent suggested that accidents happen to people who create problems. It wasn't subtle." From his jacket, Jason pulled out a thumb drive. "This has copies of everything I could download without raising flags, the real financials, Vincent's background check that Mom ignored, recordings of meetings where they discussed how to handle the daughter problem. I can't stop them directly, they're watching me too closely now. But maybe you can." As he handed me the drive, he made a final offer. "There's also a buyout agreement. $2 million for your shares, based on Dad's original will percentages. Sign it, and you can walk away clean. Mom authorized it as a nuisance payment to make you go away. And if I don't sign?" His expression darkened. "Then they'll destroy what's left of your reputation. Vincent has connections with tabloids, social media influencers, industry blogs. They're prepared to launch a full character assassination. The embezzlement accusations were just the beginning." I pocketed the thumb drive but left the buyout agreement on the bench. "I'll think about it." Back at Natalie's apartment, we examined Jason's files, finding they corroborated much of what we had already discovered and added crucial new evidence. Most damning were the recorded conversations where Vincent and Mom explicitly discussed removing me because I might cause problems with the inheritance issue. "This proves they knew about Dad's original will," Natalie said triumphantly. "It's the smoking gun we needed." While the evidence was compelling, we still faced the problem of how to use it effectively before the shareholder meeting. Then, unexpectedly, another ally emerged. Elizabeth, Jason's wife of 3 years, reached out through a secure email account. "Jason told me he met with you. There's more you should know. Vincent threatened our children when Jason questioned a document last week. I've been documenting everything. Meet me at my yoga studio tomorrow morning. The next day, Elizabeth provided additional documents Jason hadn't been able to access, including emails between Mom and the family lawyer immediately after Dad's death, discussing the need to simplify the will immediately. She also revealed that Vincent had made her uncomfortable from the moment he appeared, often making thinly veiled threats wrapped in compliments. "Your mother is not the woman I thought I was marrying into," Elizabeth said, her voice shaking. "Jason is finally seeing it, but he's trapped. He's afraid of what she might do if he openly defies her." With Elizabeth's documents adding to our growing case, we made a bold decision. Through Patricia's connections, we arranged a meeting with Sophia Martinez, a respected business reporter for the Boston Globe, known for her investigative work on corporate fraud. "I need to verify all of this independently," Sophia cautioned after reviewing our evidence. "And your mother's lawyers will fight like hell to keep this story from publishing. But if everything checks out," she nodded appreciatively at the files. "This is the kind of corporate scandal that wins journalism awards." While Sophia began her verification process, we prepared for the shareholder meeting, now just 4 days away. Patricia had secured us legitimate access by filing an emergency motion arguing that, as potential shareholders under the contested will, we had the right to attend and speak. The judge, clearly troubled by the evidence Patricia presented about the will discrepancies, granted a limited order allowing us to attend the meeting but not to vote. It was a partial victory that at least got us in the door. The morning of the shareholder meeting arrived with perfect dramatic timing. Just as attendees were gathering at Wilson Elegance headquarters, the Boston Globe published Sophia's explosive front-page investigation, Family Betrayal and Corporate Fraud, the Wilson Elegance Scandal. The article methodically outlined the evidence of financial misrepresentation, the suspicious circumstances of the accelerated sale, and the systematic removal of family members who raised concerns. More devastating for my mother personally was the sidebar article revealing Vincent Mercer's true identity as Vincent Morelli, a twice-investigated con artist who had been involved in 3 previous fraudulent business sales. His carefully crafted business advisor persona was dismantled paragraph by paragraph, alongside photos showing him with different appearances in each of his previous schemes. As we entered the meeting room, the tension was palpable. Board members and executives huddled in corners, frantically reading the article on their phones. Luminary representatives stood in a tight cluster, faces grim. And at the head of the room, my mother sat beside Vincent, her expression a mask of cold fury. When she spotted Natalie and me, something flashed in her eyes, something that might have been fear before hardening back to anger. Vincent leaned over to whisper something in her ear, but she shook her head sharply and straightened her posture. "Let's proceed with the meeting," she announced, her voice steady despite the chaos. "We have a company to sell." As the formalities began, I noticed Jason sitting off to the side, his expression unreadable. When our eyes met, he gave an almost imperceptible nod. Whatever happened next, I realized, he had made his choice. When the time came for discussion before the vote, I stood and walked to the podium. The room fell silent as I placed my evidence folders on the stand. "Before this vote proceeds," I began, my voice stronger than I felt, "there are some facts all shareholders and potential buyers should know." For the next 20 minutes, I methodically presented our case, displaying documents on the projection screen and explaining the pattern of fraud and manipulation. I revealed the original will and the evidence suggesting it had been altered after Dad's death. I outlined the systematic removal of family members and longtime employees who raised questions. "This isn't just about who owns Wilson Elegance," I concluded. "It's about the integrity that was built into this company by Thomas Wilson and his parents before him. It's about honesty in business and honesty in family. The sale you're voting on today isn't just tainted by fraud, it's built entirely on deception." Throughout my presentation, Mom's expression never changed a frozen mask of dignity. But Vincent grew increasingly agitated, finally standing to interrupt. This is absurd. These are the desperate fabrications of a disgruntled former employee with obvious psychological problems. Mrs. Wilson already addressed these ridiculous allegations. Actually, Jason's voice cut through the room as he stood. My sister is telling the truth. He walked forward, joining me at the podium. I've been part of this deception from the beginning, something I'll have to live with for the rest of my life. But I can't stay silent anymore. Mom's mask finally cracked. Jason, sit down immediately. No, Mother, he replied calmly. I think I've been sitting down for far too long. What followed was the public unraveling of Rebecca Wilson. As Jason confirmed each of our allegations, adding his own first-hand account of the fraudulent activities, Mom's composure disintegrated. She began shouting accusations, first at me, then at Natalie, then finally at Jason, calling him weak, ungrateful, a traitor to the family. When the Luminary representatives announced they were withdrawing their offer pending investigation, Vincent made his move to escape. But security, already alerted by Patricia, blocked the exits. In her final desperate countermove, Mom stood and addressed the stunned room. Everything that happened was Jason's idea. He orchestrated all of it, the financial manipulations, Audrey's removal, everything. I was just trying to protect my son from his own mistakes. The naked attempt to sacrifice her own son shocked even those who had remained loyal to her. Jason's face registered the blow, but then hardened with resolution. I have recordings of every conversation we've had for the past 6 months, Mother, he said quietly. Every instruction you gave. Every plan you approved. I started documenting everything the day you suggested we might need to handle Audrey the same way we handled Natalie. As security escorted Vincent from the room and shareholders rushed to distance themselves from the unfolding scandal, I watched my mother, the woman who had shaped every aspect of my life for 34 years, transform from the formidable Rebecca Wilson into a desperate stranger I hardly recognized. The facade had finally cracked completely, revealing what had been hidden underneath all along. The shareholder meeting's dramatic conclusion was only the beginning of a prolonged legal and personal battle that consumed the next 6 months of our lives. While the immediate sale to Luminary had been halted, the damage to Wilson Elegance, both financially and reputationally, was severe. Customers withdrew, partners distanced themselves, and employees began seeking positions elsewhere. Mom, however, was far from defeated. After the initial shock, she assembled an aggressive legal team from 3 separate high-powered firms. Their strategy was clear: deny everything, attack our credibility, and drag out proceedings until we ran out of money or will to continue. Your mother is facing potential criminal charges for will tampering and fraud, Patricia explained during a strategy session in her increasingly cluttered office. She's fighting for her freedom now, not just her reputation or control of the company. The legal battle quickly took its toll on all of us. Natalie's design business suffered as she devoted most of her time to our case. My small savings were completely depleted, forcing me to take a series of part-time jobs while continuing to build our case. The constant stress manifested physically: weight loss, insomnia, a persistent stress-induced eye twitch I couldn't control. My personal life, already damaged by the initial betrayal, deteriorated further. Friends who had initially been supportive grew tired of my singular focus on the case. A promising relationship I had just begun before the crisis ended, when my potential partner admitted he didn't want to date someone whose life was one endless family drama. Natalie suffered a more direct attack when her apartment was mysteriously vandalized while we were at a court hearing. Nothing of significant value was taken, but her investigation files were scattered and her computer was missing. Though we couldn't prove Mom's involvement, the timing was too convenient to be coincidence. She's trying to wear us down, Natalie observed grimly as we cleaned up the mess, and it's working. The most significant breakthrough in our case came from an unexpected quarter. A financial investigator hired by Luminary's legal team to assess their exposure in the failed deal uncovered Vincent's true background. Far from being merely a questionable business advisor, Vincent Mercer, divided by Morelli, was a sophisticated con artist with connections to organized crime in 3 states. He had a pattern of targeting family businesses with complex emotional dynamics, inserting himself as both business advisor and romantic interest to the decision-maker. When confronted with this evidence and the prospect of serious federal charges, Vincent did what survivors do: he disappeared. One morning, Mom arrived at court to find her star defender and romantic partner had emptied their joint accounts and fled, presumably to a country without extradition. This betrayal seemed to break something fundamental in our mother. Her testimony became erratic, her strategy increasingly desperate. When her attorneys suggested a potential plea agreement, she fired them on the spot, hiring an even more aggressive team with instructions to destroy us, regardless of cost. The toll extended to Jason as well. Though he had ultimately sided with us at the shareholder meeting, his position remained precarious. Mom's new legal strategy painted him as the primary architect of the fraud, arguing she had been manipulated by both Vincent and her own son. While we knew this was false, Jason's earlier participation in the scheme made him vulnerable. "She's trying to save herself by sacrificing me," Jason said during a rare private meeting at Elizabeth's parents' home, where they had relocated for safety. "Just like she sacrificed you and Natalie." The most painful revelation came during Mom's deposition regarding Dad's death and the altered will. Under intense questioning from Patricia, she finally snapped. "Thomas was weak," she shouted, abandoning the calm, controlled demeanor she had maintained for decades. "He would have driven the company into the ground with his outdated ideas about family values and ethical business. I did what was necessary to secure our future." While she stopped short of admitting to any involvement in Dad's death, her callous dismissal of him and her explicit acknowledgement that she had seen his principles as obstacles rather than strengths confirmed what we had long suspected. The mother we thought we knew had never really existed. As the legal proceedings dragged on, Mom made one final, desperate move. Through intermediaries, she approached several key Wilson Elegance board members with a proposal to essentially burn down what remained of the company rather than lose control of it. She would sell off the valuable real estate holdings, liquidate inventory at a loss, and distribute the remaining assets to friendly shareholders before any court could award Natalie and me our rightful shares. She would rather destroy Dad's legacy completely than see us have any part of it, I realized when Jason brought us this information. This final betrayal, the willingness to destroy what generations of Wilsons had built out of pure spite, was what finally turned the tide in our favor. Board members who had remained loyal to Mom through everything else balked at this scorched earth approach. One by one, they began reaching out to us, offering testimony and evidence in exchange for positions in whatever remained of Wilson Elegance after the dust settled. The final confrontation occurred not in a courtroom, but at the family home. Against the advice of our attorneys, Natalie, Jason, and I agreed to meet with Mom one last time before the judge ruled on our case. We hoped, perhaps naively, that some resolution might still be possible, that somewhere beneath the ambition and manipulation was still the mother we remembered from childhood. We found her sitting in Dad's old study, surrounded by family photos she had apparently been reviewing. For a moment, seeing her there smaller somehow, older, I felt a flicker of the old connection, the desire for her approval that had shaped so much of my life. "You've won," she said without preamble. "The board has turned against me. The company is collapsing. Are you satisfied now?" "This isn't about winning, Mom," Natalie replied. "It's about the truth." "The truth," Mom repeated with a bitter laugh. "The truth is that I gave everything to this family and this business. I sacrificed my own dreams, my own identity, and my reward is to be betrayed by my own children." "You betrayed us first," Jason said quietly. "You tried to erase us when we didn't comply with your plans." For a brief moment, I thought I saw something like regret flicker across her face. Then her expression hardened again, the familiar mask sliding back into place. "If your father had been stronger, none of this would have been necessary," she said coldly. "What really happened to Dad?" I asked. The question that had haunted me for months finally escaping. Did you have something to do with his death? She looked at me directly, her eyes eerily similar to my own. Your father died of a heart attack, Audrey. Sometimes people just die, and we're left to clean up their messes. That's what I've been doing for 14 years, cleaning up Thomas's mess. Whether this was truth or another manipulation, I would never know with certainty. But in that moment, looking at the stranger who was my mother, I realized it didn't matter anymore. The woman who had raised me, criticized me, shaped me, she was gone, if she had ever truly existed at all. As we left the house for the last time, I looked back to see Mom standing at the window, watching us go. For a second, I thought I saw her raise her hand, as if to wave or call us back. But then she turned away, disappearing into the shadows of the house that had never really been a home. The legal resolution of our case against Mom took another 3 months, but the emotional aftermath would last much longer. The judge ultimately ruled in our favor on most counts, recognizing Natalie and me as rightful shareholders based on Dad's original will. Mom was ordered to repay millions in misappropriated funds and face separate criminal charges for fraud and will tampering. Vincent was eventually apprehended in Argentina and extradited to face multiple federal charges. When offered a reduced sentence for information, he quickly implicated Mom in every aspect of the scheme, revealing a partnership that had been calculated from the beginning. Whether their romantic involvement had been genuine or just another layer of manipulation remained unclear. The Wilson elegance that emerged from the wreckage was a shadow of its former self. 8 of 15 stores had to be closed. Loyal employees had scattered during the uncertainty. The brand that had taken 3 generations to build had been severely damaged in less than a year. Yet from the ashes, something new began to form. With Natalie's design expertise, Jason's business acumen, and my marketing experience, we started the painful process of rebuilding, not to recapture what had been lost, but to create something that honored our father's original vision while addressing the realities of modern retail. We're not trying to be Wilson Elegance too, I explained to the remaining staff at our first all-company meeting. We're creating something new that carries forward the values that made this company special in the first place: quality, integrity, and genuine connection with customers. Jason's journey to recovery proved the most challenging. Having been closest to Mom and deepest in her confidence, his disillusionment was profound. For weeks after the final court ruling, he struggled with depression and guilt over his role in our expulsions. I should have seen through her sooner, he said during one difficult family dinner. I should have protected you both. She manipulated all of us, Natalie reminded him. She was a master at playing on our insecurities, our desire for her approval. But I was her weapon against you, he insisted. I can't just pretend that didn't happen. Healing the broken trust between siblings took time and intention. We began with weekly business meetings that gradually evolved into family dinners, then into genuine reconnection. We established clear communication protocols for the restructured business, ensuring decisions were transparent and consensual, the opposite of how Mom had operated. The process of rebuilding extended beyond the family to former employees who had been pushed out over the years. We reached out to those who had been unfairly terminated, offering positions where possible or assistance finding placement elsewhere. Many were understandably wary, but some, recognizing the genuine change in leadership, chose to return. Rachel, the former accountant whose evidence had been crucial to our case, became our new CFO. Martin Chen came out of retirement to consult on operations during the transition. Even William Reynolds, recovered from his health scare, rejoined the board as an advisor. My own healing journey was complicated. For so long, my identity had been shaped by my relationship with Mom, seeking her approval, adapting to her criticism, orienting my life around her expectations. Without that defining force, I found myself adrift, unsure of who I was or what I truly wanted. You've spent your whole adult life being Rebecca Wilson's daughter, my therapist observed during one particularly difficult session. Now you get to discover who Audrey Wilson really is. That discovery led me back to my original passion for journalism and storytelling. While maintaining my role in the family business, I enrolled in evening classes to complete the degree I'd abandoned after Dad died. Writing about my experiences not for publication, but for clarity helped me process the trauma and betrayal. Natalie found healing through art, incorporating elements of our family story into her designs. What began as personal therapy evolved into a critically acclaimed collection titled Fractured Legacy that helped reestablish her name in the design world. One unexpectedly positive outcome was the renewed relationship with our extended family. Relatives who had been gradually pushed away by Mom over the years, cousins, aunts, uncles, reached out after the truth became public. Many had their own stories of manipulation and exclusion, creating a shared understanding that helped all of us make sense of the past. 6 months after the final court ruling, we held a private ceremony at Dad's grave. We brought documentation of everything that had happened, the court transcripts, the business restructuring plans, news articles about the case, and took turns reading portions aloud. "We wanted you to know the truth, Dad," I said, placing fresh flowers beside his headstone. "And we wanted you to see that in the end, your values won out." The Wilson family business continues, built on the foundation of integrity you created. As we stood there together, the 3 Wilson children finally reunited, I felt something shift within me. The anger that had fueled me through months of legal battles began to recede, replaced by a quieter determination to move forward. Mom ultimately accepted a plea deal that kept her out of prison, but placed her under house arrest with significant financial penalties. She refused all contact with us, moving eventually to Florida, where she reportedly lived alone in a small condo, a universe away from the mansion and status she had once commanded. In a strange way, her text message, "Don't call or come over, we're done," had been prophetic, though not in the way she intended. We were done with the cycles of emotional manipulation, done with the toxic pursuit of perfection and approval, done with sacrificing our authentic selves to maintain a facade of family harmony. My response, "Got your last wish," had also proven true, though again, not as either of us had imagined. Her last wish, whether she recognized it or not, had been for freedom from the constraints of family, from the obligation to care for and nurture her children. In setting us adrift, she had ultimately freed us to find our way back to each other and to the legacy our father had always intended us to share. 1 year to the day after receiving that fateful text, I stood in the reopened flagship store of what we now called Wilson Heritage, watching customers engage with the revitalized space. Beside me, Natalie and Jason chatted with longtime clients who had returned after hearing about the changes. The business was smaller now, more focused on quality than expansion, but it was honest and true to its roots. As I looked around at what we had managed to save and rebuild, I realized that some things broken can be remade stronger at the fractured places. Our family would never be whole in the conventional sense. The wound left by our mother's betrayal would always be part of our story. But the family we had created from the wreckage, a family built on honesty, mutual support, and shared purpose, was perhaps more genuine than what had existed before. In the end, Mom's text hadn't marked the end of our family story. It had simply turned the page to a new chapter, one we were writing together. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have fought back or walked away? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that family betrayal doesn't have to be the end of your story. Thank you for listening, and remember that sometimes our deepest wounds become the doorways to our most authentic selves.